Because I'm satellite Wi-Fi. I'm out here in the woods.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just keep going if I cut out. So, and most people in the group do know that I live out in the woods, so I do cut out sometimes. So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's live video with Dr. Kristin Lloyd from Bariatric Mindsets. Today, we're going to talk about trauma, the window of tolerance, and building resilience through COVID-19. So, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Kristin, and let you take the stage, and I'm going to watch all the comments and scroll your presentation for you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for bringing me into your home and having you share this, allow me to share this message with your following. So I really, really appreciate you inviting me to come and hang out with you guys. Okay, so let's get started. So understanding trauma, window of tolerance. I usually start with an introduction of myself, and I am the founder of Bariatric Mindset. I'll be honest, I didn't anticipate that this is a direction that I would go in. And if somebody told me 10 years ago, hey, you'll be talking about weight loss, I would have thought that you were lying because this is not something I ever thought I'd get into. But it was after my own weight loss surgery. I had gastric sleeve in 2013 and then started working on my doctoral dissertation in the process of lifestyle change after weight loss surgery, that I really started to see a need for more of the psychological impact of mindset shifts after weight loss surgery. I've authored 2 books, Bariatric Mindset Success and Release Your Regain. And I'm also a hypnotherapist, energy editing practitioner, and energy psychology practitioner. So, and I've lost 200 pounds and maintained it, and really focus on the mindset shifts after weight loss surgery because I think they're so important. So, in our first slide, I kind of want to discuss why trauma. So not everybody in the bariatric community is going to have trauma, but one of the things that's coming up right now in COVID is we're seeing a lot of the trauma response. There's articles all over the internet about how COVID is creating what they're calling like a post-traumatic COVID disorder. And so trauma is defined as an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident. So it could be a rape, a natural disaster, could be childhood stuff. And usually right after there's that immediate shock or denial, but then the longer term reactions or implications are the emotion dysregulation. Some people have flashbacks, strained relationships. There can also be physical symptoms. And there can also be a need to self-soothe, which could also be where some emotional eating comes from. So there's acute trauma, which is usually from a single event, chronic trauma, repeated stressful events. So certain examples of this would be like child abuse, bullying. If you're an adult child of an alcoholic, sometimes codependency symptoms can show up, like chronic trauma because of the people pleasing. I see this a lot in the bariatric community, domestic violence. And then there's complex trauma as a result to exposure of multiple traumatic events. So this could be where somebody has experienced childhood physical abuse or sexual abuse, and there is a very high percentage of trauma within the bariatric population. This actually came up in the ACE study, which took place from 1995 to 1997, and it was between Kaiser Permanente and the CDC. And so this specific journal article, I just highlighted the topic of the article just to show that in the Journal of Trauma and Stress, adverse child effects are associated with obesity and disordered eating. And so while obesity is a complex disease, there could be some underlying trauma that might be leading to some emotional eating. And what we've seen in the COVID pandemic is this resurgence of weight regain that's happening within the bariatric community. We're also seeing where people are really struggling with their emotions, going out feeling like they can't go out. There's uncertainty, there's financial distress. So there's a lot of different things that are going on, and a lot of people are experiencing trauma triggers. So what are trauma triggers? So there's two different things that I see come up. So one of the first things with trauma triggers are people who are completely numb to what's going on, or they're going into almost like a freeze state. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of future slides when we talk about the window of tolerance, which is related to polyvagal research. And so polyvagal research is actually related to the vagus nerve in the body. And I'm not going to get too far into the technical side because we could be here all day. But what you need to know is that this is impacting your nervous system. And so because of the trauma that is popping up with uncertainty, you are under, a lot of people are under a certain amount of stress. And so where trauma comes in is where there's uncertainty mixed with distress, mixed with a lot of other happenings that are going on in the world, again, that could also be related to flashbacks, childhood events, especially if there was uncertainty. I've talked with people who have said, oh, this reminds me of when my dad lost his job when I was 9, and now all of a sudden I'm hoarding food because I don't know if we're going to be able to get it again. And that started to happen at the beginning of the pandemic. And now that we've been in it for a while, we're seeing a lot of different emotional responses where there's some people who are returning to disordered eating. There's some people who are not dealing with emotions, and this is part of that trauma response. And then there are people who are dealing with it. This could also be part of the trauma response because they've been expected to handle things. And again, this relates to maybe the family of origin that you grew up in, where they're handling things because they may be a first responder, they may be a nurse or a doctor, and so they've got to be on, but then they're, again, through the window of tolerance, they're going from an on state to a like a freeze state because their bodies, they're on for so much until they kind of crash. So I'm going to talk more about the specifics of that, but just to get an idea of how this pandemic is affecting everybody differently. It's also impacting by creating some emotion dysregulation. And this refers to an inability to regulate one's emotional responses according to stimuli. So one of the things that comes up with emotion dysregulation is really chaotic emotions, not know how to process emotions. And one of the things that can help with this is actually there's a dialectical behavior therapy model that helps with acceptance and change. And so when someone is emotionally dysregulated, there can be this, okay, what do I need right now? And that first thing that a lot of people go to, because it's comforting and because it's available, is food. And so what we're going to talk about today is some emotion regulation tools that aren't food, but it's important to recognize if and when you might be getting emotionally dysregulated as a result of the stressors that are being presented, which could be triggering a trauma response. Another thing to note here is that bariatric patients have a higher rate of exposure to trauma and emotion dysregulation, especially because of early childhood, potentially early childhood trauma, and then which can lead to emotional eating, food addiction, and eating disorders, especially binge eating. So I see a lot of individuals who have obsessive compulsive eating and binge eating. And this next graphic I actually found that was representative of the ACEs study, and this was from the World Health Organization, how adverse childhood experiences led to social, emotional, cognitive impairment, which led to adoption of health risk behaviors, which led to disease, disability, and social problems, and then early death. And I thought that this was really profound to share because when people are struggling, they may be returning to foods that are highly palatable. So a lot of processed stuff because it's easy, it's quick, it's easy, and it's cheap. right? It's quick, it's easy, and it's cheap. And so when people are struggling, these can be the things that they go to. And it can also remind them, especially if there was scarcity in childhood, if there was trauma in childhood, this can remind you of childhood. It can remind you of what you might refer to as the good old days, yet it's also contributing to healthy, unhealthy behaviors, health risk behaviors, and it could be costing you instead of helping you. And so while there may be some individuals who are returning to depression or their anxiety is high, again, that return to using food to soothe can be as a result of what happened in childhood. So relationship between early childhood trauma and health and well-being, there is a correlation later in life. So I would just ask that you look at this and see if this resonates, if this comes up for you, what comes up for you. And then of course, as we go on, I'll give more information, but this may be an opportunity for you to work on something like this in therapy. So just throwing that out there, if this is something that's coming up. So this next slide is the window of tolerance. And this is important, adapted from Dr. Stephen Porges, who is a well-known clinician and researcher on polyvagal theory. And so I've been using this in a couple different trainings because this has been what a lot of people are struggling with during the COVID-19 crisis. And so what you'll see at the top, right, window of tolerance, trauma, anxiety related responses, widening the comfort zone for increased flexibility. So most initially, what I want you guys to know is that day in and day out, we go through a wide range of tolerance through the day, right? So for those who may be getting out in their car, you go to the grocery store and there's a truck and it stops in front of you really quickly and you don't notice, but the light turns from yellow to red and you slam on your brakes and you're like, right? So you kind of go into this fight, flight response, hyper arousal. It's totally natural. It's totally normal. And by the time you get to the grocery store, you may have forgotten about it. Why? Because you're already emotionally regulated again. You've gone from that hyper aroused state back into that regulated period. There may be a part of, I can't believe that truck stopped so fast. But it's very normal for us to go in and out of regulation throughout the day. Where this becomes a problem is when someone, via anxiety, via the day in, day out, you're on hyper aroused all day long. So I don't know where my next check is coming from. I don't know if there's food in the house. I don't know when this pandemic is going to end. I don't know if my kids are going to be okay. I have to go to work and I'm a nurse. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to get it? Am I going to die? Right. So there's all of these things that could be causing you, right? Some could be thoughts. Some could actually be physiological responses that are coming from your body, again, from past trauma, because you may or may not know. So trauma is actually stored in the body. And so that could be something that's triggering, again, this trauma response in your body. So when you go into this hyper aroused state and you stay there, your body can only take it for so long. And when we look at the little descriptions, I did not create this graphic, by the way. It was designed by Dr. Deselic. And I found it on the internet. So anxiety, overwhelmed, chaotic responses, outbursts, emotionally aggressive, anger, aggression, rage, rigidness, right? Oh, I have to do it this way. Or there's some obsessive compulsive behaviors or thoughts. There's overeating or restricting, right? Addictions or impulsivity. And so your body and your mind cannot sustain that you're in this hyper aroused state for a long time. So the things again, on the left, the things that cause you to go out of this window of tolerance: unconscious thoughts, bodily feelings, feelings that you're unsafe, right? Feelings of rejection or abandonment, And then trauma-related core beliefs about self are triggered, emotional and physiological dysregulation occurs. So when you're in a dysregulated state, you're possibly in that hyper-aroused state. You get to that hyper-aroused state for a certain period of time. It could be hours, it could be days. There are people who are in that aroused state for a very long time. Let's just think of war veterans, right? People who have come back from Afghanistan or Iraq. They're also, this is where PTSD is termed. So people who have gone and then they go into a freeze state. So then what does a freeze state look like? So if you've been experiencing this, what it may look like is you're working, every single day. And then on the weekend, you just can't get off the couch. So it can manifest to where you're not present, you're emotionally unavailable, you're disconnected, you're on autopilot, there's no emotions, right? So you're just kind of like flat affect, right? Separation from self, feelings, and emotions. And this is where this comes in, because you just can't. And it can also create this freeze response where I can't even think about making dinner. I just can't. And I'm kind of giving you an example of some of the people that I've talked to that have said, gosh, I just can't. I'm doing the best that I can. Nurses, again, first responders, a lot of individuals who are doing their best to go into work every day. And to be there for the rest of us, not only first responders, but again, people who have now had to pick up jobs at, as Instacart or in other ways. So wherever you are, this is affecting everyone. And so this comfort zone, this emotionally regulated zone is where we want to stay. And what you see there in bold letters is ability to self-soothe and ability to emotionally regulate. So if you've never been taught the skills, how to emotionally regulate in childhood, in young adulthood, you may not know how to self-regulate, how to self-soothe without food. And so again, how to stay in the window of tolerance, which we're going to talk about, and I'll give you more examples. But yes, emotion regulation, deep breathing, counter negative statements with positive statements of self, right? So it could even be something like, okay, self, you're safe, you're okay, we're going to get through this, right? Breathing is a great way to slow down your heart rate. When you're hyper aroused, your heart rate could be like bam, 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 bam. And so mindfulness, being present in the here and now. But if you're thinking about, oh my gosh, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, you can get into that hyper aroused state easily. And although your intention is to, again, look out for fear, you want to prepare yourself, you want to think of all the things so that you can protect yourself. There's also this tendency of the brain to, again, protect, because we are hardwired for fear, in that we want to find a way. Is there another way? How can I make sure that I make ends meet? And yet with that comes this hyperarousal state. So I also want to share the hyperarousal state is not bad. So a lot of people tend to think, oh, this is bad, I shouldn't be in hyperarousal state. There's a very normal part. Again, we're meant to go in and out of this state throughout the day. My point in sharing this with you is that we, through this pandemic and through people who have gone through trauma, end up staying in this stuck on state. And what we want to do is learn how to get emotionally regulated through new tools and techniques so that you're not stuck in that hyper aroused state, going from hypo or hyper to hyper to hypo, because it's not productive. It's not conducive to productive living. The other thing I want to note about this slide, so in hyper aroused state, is that one of the ways, and another way to explain it is your sympathetic nervous system is the hyper aroused state. Your parasympathetic nervous system is what calms you down. So another important thing to note about this is your stomach can only digest food in a parasympathetic state. You must be calm. You must be in that rest and digest state. So when you eat something, your body naturally goes to flip over to that parasympathetic. It's just how we're made. That's just science. So there could be this tendency of, oh, I'm hyper aroused. I need something to calm me down. Let me eat something, hand to mouth. I need to calm down. So that's that's one of the ways that we may be reaching for food, yet we can, through the practice of pausing and learning to pivot, can help ourselves to choose something else, because that hand to mouth isn't helping us with long-term health and with our weight. But I'm saying that because it can be very physiologically calming, but again, it's not helpful and conducive to the long term, because then you end up training yourself to search for food rather than to learn how to calm through alternative and healthier methods. So we can move on to the next slide. And if you have any questions in between slides, let me know. So the next thing I have on here is what I call the starter pack for self-regulation. So what's really important is that we tune into hunger and we tune into the needs of our body. And again, I have on here parasympathetic arousal. The reason it's important to tune into hunger is when you're agitated, when you're in that hyperarousal state, you may think that you're hungry, but you may not actually be physically hungry. You might be because your body has been, your adrenals have been going, right? Glucose is flooding the system. Your body might be signaling, hey, we're actually hungry here. We're going to need more fuel for this run that we're about to go on, but you may not actually be running. So this is where it's really important that you learn how to self-soothe and calm yourself and tune into the needs of your body. Okay, what's happening in my body right now? So a lot of times people think, oh, I need to tune into my feelings. That's one piece. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And that's what we call a top-down approach in the therapy world. And the other thing that has only been really made available in the last 20 or 30 years is this bottom-up approach, that we really need to tune into our bodies and start to listen to physical sensations. And so this is where the trauma piece comes in, because again, trauma is stored in the body. So when we start to recognize physical sensations such as, oh, my heart is beating a little faster. Oh, I'm really nervous. My hands are starting to shake, right? So we may think or assume that these sensations are related to hunger. They might be, but they may not be. They might be related to anxiety. They might be related to stress. So this is why it's so important that we tune into the body to listen to what the body is saying. This is also where for those who are experiencing trauma, it's a little bit more of a deep book, but there is a book out there called The Body Keeps Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. So that's a very famous book on trauma and the body. So tuning into your hunger and knowing what true hunger is definitely important, so that you're not, again, eating feelings or attempting to eat to calm yourself down. Grounding, I have a couple graphics that are on the next couple slides, so I'm going to talk about that. But grounding is really important for orienting yourself to time and place and really being present. It's another form of mindfulness, but it's another way to really ground yourself in the present moment. So mindfulness is important. So a lot of people know mindfulness-based stress reduction, being present in the here and now. Okay, so how do you do that? So one of the things that I would suggest is you take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and you could even look out at a window and name 5 things that you can see. Or you can be present and say, okay, let me look for all the blue things in my room, right? For 30 seconds. Or it could be that you close your eyes and you just put your hand over your heart and you're just present in this moment, just focused on your breath. It could be that your feet are on the floor, you're wiggling your toes, and you're just present with your feet, or you're present with your hands, feeling your hands. So these are things that just bring you into this moment. And you could even use your body, your hands, your feet to bring you back into your body and to be in this moment. And all it takes is 30 or 60 seconds. It does not need to be complex. So another thing that's important is refocusing your mind away from food. This can also be where food fantasies pop up because you're attempting to distract yourself from a stressor, from what's going on in your body. And so food fantasies could be a way that you may be distracting yourself. Food is very stimulating, right? So a lot of times people will eat food to attempt to get that dopamine response, that dopamine hit in their head, and an escape, a way to numb. And so you could end up doing something totally different, like a checklist to get that dopamine, move your body. But when you notice food fantasies pop up, this could also be something that if you're training your brain to seek out food fantasies when you're stressful, then guess what? You're training your brain to seek out food fantasies when you're stressful. So you want to pivot and really go get a coloring book, go get a journal, refocus your mind away from food. This is not about demonizing food. I also want to make that really important. But I see a lot of people who end up going and watching like food porn or, the Food Network. And again, this isn't about demonizing food, but if you let food become your crutch, or if it's the central focus of your life, central focus of fulfillment, then it will continue to be. So this is really about respecting your body and respecting food. So the other thing I have here is acknowledge catastrophizing and or fears and shifting your thinking. I didn't put a video in here, but it reminds me of like that little guy on one of those GIFs where he's like, like, and somebody goes up and smacks them to like calm them down. So when you're catastrophizing, your mind is way out there and you're thinking of the most horrible things that could ever happen to you. And I recognize that this is a scary time, but we also need to be grounded in reality. And so when we acknowledge our fears, when we lean into our fears, we have the power and the ability to shift our fears. So when we are able to say, is that really going to happen? This isn't about minimizing the fears. This is about something that I call facts are friendly. I may be talking about it on another slide, but like, what are the facts of the situation here? The facts are I wear my mask. The facts are I wash my hands when I get home. The facts are, so again, that can help you to silence that inner voice that's like, tomorrow you're gonna die, right? So that catastrophizing voice that can be so menacing. So that's something that's really important, because when you listen to that catastrophizing voice on replay, of course you're going to end up in a that hyper aroused state, because your heart's going to be beating, your mind and your body is going to be focused on how do we stay alive? How do we stay alive? How do we stay alive? And so this is why really bringing this mind body concept together is soothing your mind and soothing your body, but also bringing yourself back to reality. And this is also where alternative activities come in. Right now, I hear so many people go, but I'm bored. And we're so used to being entertained. And so this may be a time that you find a class that you want to sign up for. I've never met so many people in my life that are knitting blankets or quilting. I mean, this is an absolute time to find a hobby, right? Sign up for belly dancing. Do something that's going to really excite you, but find an alternative activity, something that you might want to learn about. So right now, you may have been totally done with Netflix or any of these other streaming things, but this is an opportunity. So instead of us seeing this as, oh my gosh, I'm so bored, right? There's nobody that's going to come out behind center stage and do a dance for you. So this is an opportunity for you to say, okay, what can I do? And again, it doesn't have to cost money. It could be that you find some new interests, you learn about something that you may get involved in history, or you write poetry, or you journal, right? So there's a lot of different things that you can do. So finding alternative activities that keep your mind and your hands and mouth busy so that you're not constantly thinking about food are also going to be a key. Another thing here is urge surfing. So science says urges only last 20 to 30 minutes. So when you use alternative activities, you can surf through an urge for whatever that thing is that your mind has decided, ooh, and I want this, and you've really built it up in your head. But you've also got to shift your mind and your attention, your activity away from the urge, choose to do something else. And usually in 20 or 30 minutes, you're not even thinking about it anymore. But if you're perseverating on it, then of course it will come back up. But with everybody that I've ever worked with, when you are shifting your mind, shifting your attention, and deciding to do something different, the urges is typically gone much less than 30 minutes. Another thing that's really important, box breathing and 4-7-8 breathing. So box breathing is something that the Navy SEALs do. If it's good enough for the Navy SEALs, it's good enough for me. So box breathing, I usually suggest that people type in box breathing Navy SEALs on YouTube. There's a couple minute video. So it's really where you breathe in for 1 second, hold for 1 second, breathe out for 1 second, hold for 1 second. So it makes this box. And the one that I usually pick, it's a pink and blue background. So it's, and you can hear the guy breathing along with you. And then 4-7-8, I originally heard of from Dr. Andrew Weil. And so it's breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, and breathe out for a count of 8. And so this is also a great activity for somebody who's really struggling with getting to sleep at night. But all of these help to bring you down into the parasympathetic, because what these do is they bring down your heart rate. Who needs their heart rate brought down any more than a Navy SEAL who might be on an undercover mission? And so when we're not Navy SEALs, but when we think about what we experience and what we feel like we're going through in that hyper aroused state, we've also got to train ourselves to come back into emotion regulation and into that window of tolerance. So what you will want to do is to practice these activities. A lot of times people will say breathing, really? But breathing is I find is actually underrated. We don't focus on our breath enough, and breath work is very, very important, both for emotion regulation and getting us back into that parasympathetic state. Journaling, I find, is very important for getting out of your head. Because what goes on in here is sometimes not nice. Automatic negative thoughts, autopilot thinking, your inner critic is really loud, tells you how much you suck, how awful you are. And so you really got to get that stuff out on paper. And if you don't know how to journal, start with lists, right? So it doesn't have to be Dear Diary. This is what I'm thinking today. It could even be that you ask yourself a question, that you're having a conversation with your inner self, right? It could even be that you kind of start to you create a dialogue, or you could even talk to different parts of you. So let's say there is that part of you that's like, I must have the chocolate. Okay, dear part of you that wants the chocolate, what's really going on here? So there's a lot of different ways to journal. You can use prompts, you can not use prompts. But what I find is that when people are resisting journaling, I usually trick them into making lists and then move them into journaling in a way that they hadn't thought about it before. So, okay, let's talk about this, or let's talk about that. And once they start to get in the habit of writing things down, oh, okay, this isn't hard. So a lot of times it's the thought that it's going to be difficult or it's going to be painful. And once they start writing, it becomes a whole lot easier. And then another thing for self-regulation is moving your body. It doesn't matter how you move your body, just that you move your body. Because when you get out of your head and into your body, you're actually creating a state change, a physiological state change. And so even though your heart may be pumping when you are moving your body, that's not necessarily saying that you're always in that hyper aroused state. And it actually helps you when you do move your body, when you do exercise. It's excellent for your mental health because of the endorphins. it's going to actually help you to get back into that window of tolerance, into that that parasympathetic state a whole lot easier. So the more frequently that you move your body, especially if that could be a add-on activity to urge surfing or something else to keep you busy, it's going to help you to feel better than if you were just to, in that freeze state, lay on the couch all day. And so sometimes even in that freeze state, you can kind of negotiate with yourself, like, okay, we're just going to get up for 5 minutes. Let's just try to do this. And then again, most often I have people say, I feel so much better. Why didn't I do that earlier? And it's usually because we're all in our heads. So we've got to get out of our heads. So that's pretty much the starter pack for self-regulation. Grounding is going to be on the next 2 slides. So what are some ways to practice grounding? So this is just a nice little graphic that I found online, but 6 ways to practice grounding with anxiety and intense emotions. So with your body, lay on the ground, press your toes into the floor, right? Squeeze Play-Doh, not at the same time necessarily. These are just different things. So what are the things that you can do with your body, right? So you could even probably get one of those like hand, I don't even know what it's called, but you squeeze them. So it's a way to kind of get into your body where you have your feet on the floor. It could even be a squat, right? But just to get into your body where you're focused on where you're feeling it. So 5 senses: wear your favorite sweatshirt, use essential oils, make a cup of tea, self-soothe, take a shower or bath, find a grounding object, light a candle. And again, a grounding object could be anything. It could even be your little earbud case, right? Something that you just put in your hand, something that's comforting. Describe an object in detail, something you can observe, color, texture, shadow. Again, this is also a way to practice mindfulness. Practice the 4-7-8 breathing, right? So that's another way. And then distract. Find all the square green objects in a room, count by 7, say the date. And again, this is another way to get you out of your head. And so there's some other groundings that are on the next page that focus on what we call the 5-4-3-2-1. And so I pulled both of these graphics because they're alternates. So the traditional is 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can taste. 2 things that you can smell and 1 thing you can taste. And when it comes to taste, I usually tell people, toothpaste, ice, something like that, or maybe a mint. But if food is going to be triggering for you, then keep it to something like toothpaste, or keep it to something like a mint, something that won't necessarily be triggering, because the purpose is to ground you. The purpose is not to create excessive stimulation. So, and what you'll get from this grounding activity is, again, it brings you back into this present moment, and it takes you out of catastrophizing. So when you're in that, catastrophizing thinking, you're in that fight flight. And so the grounding is also a way to say, okay, I'm in the here and now. And one of the things I do, and I tell my clients all the time, is like, hand over your heart. So if the more that you can get in contact with your body, and the more that you're comfortable being in contact with your body, is better. Another thing I had learned in an online training was, hugging yourself, or using this as a way to regulate. And one of my favorites, and I do this along with the grounding, is, one arm under your armpit and the other one is, and just gently rocking. So this can be very soothing for your nervous system. And so, although we tend to think of mindset work just being in our head, when we're talking about trauma and the nervous system, what's very important is, when we're working towards regulation, that we're focused on the body. And so the thoughts may be the thing that's triggering the catastrophizing that's causing what's going on in the body, but we want to also soothe the body. And so that requires us to get in the body. So what's coming up? You may notice that your shoulders are clenched, or your jaw is clenched. And so again, this is where the grounding comes in, along with some body contact, where you can really focus on your breath, being in this moment, and bringing you from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. And this is going to bring you back into that window of tolerance. And these are some of the skills that are going to help you to do that. So, the next piece is practicing. This is definitely a joke, but I've thought about writing a book that's like practice. And on the inside, 5,000,000 times, just write practice, 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 practice. Because that's the thing that we don't do enough. Like, okay, so what do I need to do to get this weight off? Practice. Okay, so what do I need to do X? Practice, right? Olympic athletes are Olympic athletes, not because they are absolutely amazing. It's because they put in a lot of practice. NBA basketball players, NFL players, practice, 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 practice. And I can even think of the late Kobe Bryant, who had said, I'm not the most talented guy in the room, but I will out-practice you every single day. And so what you practice at is what you get better at. So if you're emotionally eating often, you're practicing emotional eating, and you're going to get better at emotional eating. And I do make light of it, but it's to help us to jar ourselves, to help us realize like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that. And for those who go, well, I can't help it, right? I can't help it. I will challenge you to practice the pause, to really pause, because there is a place, and I think it was Viktor Frankl who said it, that there is a place between, and I can't remember how he specifically said it, but in behaviorism, between antecedent and behavior, there is a place. There is a place to pause. So you do have a place to pause, and the more you practice the pause, you get better at practicing the pause. And so when you practice that pause enough, in that pause, you get to use any of those tools on that other sheet where you get to resist the urge to emotionally eat. And the more you practice these things, you get better at resisting the urge to emotionally eat. And then you can get excited, like, yes, I stopped myself again. Yes, right? Point for me. And you can get excited about that. And so if you're practicing emotional restraint when it comes to trigger foods, emotion regulation, and you're focused on changing behaviors, you'll get better at changing behaviors. But if you're practicing prioritizing your needs and the releasing of controlling everything else around you, because a lot of bariatric patients are control freaks, I'm not sure if you heard, but then you get better at that surrender, which is what we really need to learn, and prioritizing our own needs over everybody else, right? I give you full permission to take care of yourself today and moving on. And everybody else will be okay. They will figure it out. And everybody that you're taking care of and sacrificing yourself for, please stop. Please stop. Fill your cup first, because it's so important, because there's nobody else that can do these things for you. Nobody can eat for you. Nobody can poop for you. You got to do all this stuff by yourself. Nobody's going to be able to take care of you but you. So what you flex, right, and what you practice, you strengthen over time. So you're not going to start with a 50-pound dumbbell. You're just not. Same thing here, same thing physically. You're going to start with a 5, and then you're going to work up to an 8 or a 10, and then you're going to work up to a 15. But if you're starting with 50-pound dumbbells or 100-pound dumbbells, you're going to be like, oh, I suck. Well, of course you are, because you're supposed to start at 5. So that goes the same thing with emotional eating. That goes the same with moving your body. That goes the same with getting better at implementing any of these techniques. If you mess up, you've also got to go, oh, I messed up. Okay, what can I learn from this? And then start over. And so what you practice over time is what you get better at. So when you put this on repeat, again, you're going to hear me say practice a lot. And wow, she repeated herself a lot. Right. Because if you don't get anything else out of this, I want you to get out of this that you need to practice. And what you practice most is what's going to help you. And also when you challenge your mindset, because again, what can come up is learned helplessness. Oh, but you don't understand. This is how my life has been. Everybody has stuff. Absolutely everybody. And I have compassion for that. I really do. But when we practice learned helplessness, we get more learned helplessness. When we fall back into victim mindset, we get more victim mindset. When we fall back into, I can't do it, you don't understand, you're basically using a narrative for everybody to buy into your excuses. And that just doesn't work anymore. Because if you're buying into your excuses and you're trying to sell your excuses to everybody else, you're very committed to your excuses. And you can't be committed to results and excuses at the same time. You just can't. So what you want to do is challenge yourself to say, okay, how can I make this work? What's the one step I can take? And so your victim mindset, your helplessness thinking may have come from childhood, but you have the power within you now as an adult to heal that. You have the power now to say, what's one thing I can do to shift, right? In my thinking, in my body, I'm taking my power back. And this comes from discipline, because practice creates discipline. We're not always going to have willpower. And sometimes when you're at your weakest is when you're at your most emotional and you try to rely on willpower, but you can't. And here's why. Because when you try to use willpower and you're trying to make decisions, your decisions are made primarily from emotion mind. And so when you're attempting to use willpower, you're relying on emotion mind, but you can't, because emotion mind is, but I really want the French fries. You don't understand. And so then you're back in excuses and you're back in your feelings, and where you need to be is disciplined. So if you do happen to go out to that place, you already know what you're going to get because you're disciplined. If you have to absolutely stop somewhere on the way home, you already know what you're going to get because you're disciplined, right? You know when your workout is going to be because you're disciplined. You know that you're getting your water in because you're disciplined. Are we going to mess up? We're always going to mess up. If you don't mess up, you're not human. So I expect you to mess up. But we're a group of like perfectionists that are trying to be perfectionists that are stuck in all or nothing. And I'm trying to get you all to live in the gray. And so the expectation to rely on willpower is a fallacy. So it's discipline that will get you there, right? When you're in emotion mind, you can't expect willpower to work. So this is why disciplined is better. And one of the things that I teach all of my clients is that the word discipline, if you look it up, it comes from the Greek or Latin root to study or to learn. So discipline is not a bad word. It's not a dirty word. It actually comes from the root to learn or to study. So when you're studying something, when you're learning something, when you're practicing something, you get better at it. And that's what discipline is. It's just something that you have as part of a practice, there's that word again, that you put into plan so that you can get better. And there's no shame in messing up because you will mess up. I expect you to mess up. And when you do mess up, you can go, oh, there's my mess up. What can I learn from it? And then get right back on. And so that's where practice comes in. Same thing with getting into that hyperarousal state. Oh, I'm in that hyperarousal state again. Oh, I put myself there. Okay. Or I'm freaked out about something. Okay. Where are my skills? Where are my tools? Right. And so when you focus on using all these skills and tools, you build resilience, because with practice, you become resilient. And so when you focus on resilience, you just get better at what you practice. And so resilience leads to goal setting with realistic expectations and increased self-esteem, right? You learn from your mistakes, understanding and accepting your strengths and weaknesses. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we have an opportunity to say, oh, I want to strengthen that, right? Self-control, but self-control is not what you may think it is in the terms of willpower. Self-control is also the ability to say, okay, self, you're really stressed, you're really struggling. We want to work on regulation. So I'm going to work on some breath work, or I'm going to journal this out. So self-control can also be practicing self-care, putting yourself back in the driver's seat of your life. That's what self-control is. It's not always, quote unquote, resisting the urge. Sure, it's that too, but it's so much more than that. So having a willingness to overcome difficulties rather than succumbing to them, right? Being optimistic rather than pessimistic. having social skills and the ability to seek assistance from others, ability to recognize your own emotions and the emotions of others, and then having problem solving skills. And one of the things that I learned is that the way that we see the problem can sometimes be the problem. And so sometimes in our mindset, we need to be solution focused rather than problem focused. And so if we're stuck in sometimes problem solving mode can be that we're focused too much on the problem in order to see the solution. So sometimes we have to shift our thinking to say, okay, is there another way of seeing this? Is there another solution? Again, journaling about it, getting out of your head, getting into your group, talking to those who you are in group or fellowship with, that you can say, okay, here's what's coming up for me. Do you guys have any suggestions? And then allowing others to support you, because we can't do this alone. And so that's another opportunity to build resilience, is to also offer some vulnerability from self. Nobody is perfect. And when you isolate and you pull way back, you're not allowing yourself to be helped, and you end up hurting yourself, not helping yourself. And so when there is this mindset, I see it all the time, of folks who say, I don't want to be a burden, that's actually going back into victimhood. And so I challenge you to shift that thinking and to say, I'm allowing myself to be a warrior. I'm allowing myself to be resilient, to be vulnerable, to say that I need help, because I am human. I'm not perfect, and I'm here to get back up. And so I think that that's important as well. And I'm not sure if I have any other slides, to be quite honest, because I can't remember. So resilience, kind of like my final slide. So resilience equals awareness plus practicing new skills. So again, what you get better at is what you're practicing. So what I'm kind of like to bring it all together, what's really important is that you get in touch with your body. So it's not a matter of if you're going to get dysregulated, you will. It's a matter of when. Same thing. It's not a matter of if you're going to mess up. It's when. I expect these things to happen because you're human. If they don't happen, I'd be a little concerned. So yet we don't want to be in that hyper aroused state for too long, which is why it's important that we have some regulating skills, right? So it's important that we get in touch with our body and we focus on not only discomfort, but like, what do I notice? Is there anything weird? Is there something something tight? Is there something warm, loose? So it's just bringing about body awareness. And if we're disconnected from our bodies or dissociated from our bodies, then again, that's a clue that there may be some fear there. There may be some trauma therapy needed, some deeper work. And I would definitely go to someone who's trauma trained in your local area if there's some of this stuff that does come up, right? Because we don't want to mess with trauma. But when you get in touch with your body, it's not just, the window of tolerance, but, oh, I'm noticing, you could even start to notice other things like, oh, I notice every time my boss says, hey, I need to talk to you, that you freak out, like, right? So you could put some things together. Oh, I'm thinking something bad's going to happen. Or, so this, you can start to unravel certain things for your own knowledge and wisdom. But getting in touch with your body can also give you insight on, oh, you know what? Every single day at 3:00, I'm noticing X, Y, or Z. And then I want to go to the refrigerator and eat something, but I'm not physically hungry. So you get to kind of be your own little investigator to see what's happening with you. And the more that you track triggers, awarenesses, it's really going to help you in the long run to heal and to grow. So again, get out of your head and into your body. We want to seek sensations, felt sense. Another thing that I talk about with felt sense is if you ever walked into a room and again, pre-COVID, because nobody's walking into any rooms really with anybody else right now, but and there's just this sense like something's off, right? Something's off. So that's your felt sense. That's your body. And so we have that intuitive guidance system within us. It's part of how our body is hardwired. And so it's important that, again, because that's so sensitive to being on, and again, when we're on too long, we can go into that freeze state, that we focus on taking care of ourselves with that window of tolerance, with that regulation. And so when I say get out of your head and into your body, whatever you do, yoga, running, movement, weight training, whatever it is that you do, when you get into your body, you're connecting with your body, right? So you're connecting with how certain things feel. And again, and you probably know this better than I do, Tasha, but like for them to talk to their doctor if their heart rate goes up too high or things like that. But getting into their body can be such a very powerful thing to curb triggers and cravings and things like that. So the next thing is, what's in your head? Is it helpful or is it hurtful? Like, how do you talk to yourself? So I often suggest write down a list of your most common thoughts. We're not going to be able to keep track of our thoughts. We think millions of thoughts every single day, but if the voice in your head is largely negative, you want to reframe them. So one of the things, again, facts are friendly. We don't want to believe everything that we think. Like, is this true or fabricated? Is this my fear voice? Is this my shame voice? Is this my angry voice? Is this my judgy voice? Right? That's coming up. So you want to reframe that. And then the whole facts are friendly is both for anxiety and distressing thoughts, which is what's real, right? What's the reality of this? And it helps you to pick out what's fact from fiction. And so the facts are what we're stuck with, really, and what we want to bring into our awareness, because all the other stuff can be fiction. And we can be telling ourselves all of these very big fabricated stories about how all of these awful things are going to happen to us, again, because we're hardwired for fear. And yet I don't hear that many people going, wow, what if I won the lottery today? Or what if I got a promotion? Or what if something really awesome happened to me? Or, right? So we want to reframe those. And reframe means to flip what you're thinking and to flip those negative thoughts to get out of stinking thinking. And so again, another thing I wrote before, but I'm going to put it again because I think it's so important to have a list of activities that you can engage in rather than eating when you do feel triggered, that you do have the opportunity to practice the pause often, and to find some things that are emotionally soothing that don't involve food. And you can find them when you look for them. And it is important that you look for things that are fulfilling, that light you up, that bring you joy, that are satisfying, that aren't food. Because if your whole life is revolved around food, then we kind of go back on this cycle. And then, of course, another thing that's important is to work through your own window of tolerance, start to practice what's triggering, work through your triggers, learning to calm yourself, and again, grounding, mindfulness, and breathing. And then if you need additional support, again, if some things are coming up, the things that I've said, especially with regards to past trauma, especially if there's past sexual abuse or physical abuse, please make sure that you see a local therapist in your area that can help you and support you to work through these things. And that's pretty much what I got.
That was perfect. I love the slides because that's a lot of the things that I go over in this group. And you know, we always say, right, I'm a nutrition coach. If you need, if you need help, you need to seek therapy, and go
Yep.
to, that is what your license in. That's what you go to many years of school for, right?
So many, search out more than I can count. Yes.
To really search out the help, because that's the only way that we get better. But what I loved about your slides is that you have to practice. And I do a lesson on, my clients always hear me say, how do you know that to be true? So if they say something, then I come back and I ask, how do you know that to be true? And they have to think about it, because a lot of times we will get caught up in our own head and the lies that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it's so important to, like you said, practice, question yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Calming techniques. And these are things people don't think about. It's like the stressor hit, the trigger hit, it cued me to do something. And then, like you said, then you want to go to food. Okay, what can I do to soothe myself without food? And then it's like dealing with this uncomfortable feeling. Like, okay, I don't like this feeling. I don't want to deal with this feeling. How do I make it go away?
Right.
And we have to sit with our emotions. And that is the most uncomfortable part
Right.
of moving past things.
Right. But that's the thing is once you do it, you get better at doing it. Like you get better at handling those things again once you do it. Like maybe the first 5 times are hard, but then it gets easier. It gets easier. I mean, I equate a lot of stuff to sports psychologies just because it makes sense. But it's the same stuff, right? We've got to practice to get better, and nobody becomes an Olympic athlete by hoping and wishing. Like they're up every single day, and a lot of times they don't want to be. So that's the other thing I address too is nobody wants to confront difficult emotions. Like I don't, but I do it because it's something that I know when I do it and I get better at it, that it will dissipate. So that's the other thing is that's just science though. So I rely a lot on that science to help me to go, oh, I just got to do this a couple times. It's kind of like, oh, if I ride a bike and if I learn how to ride a bike, I'll get better at riding a bike. Okay, so I'll be able to do this by myself. Cool, right? So all we need is training and then to remember that training and remember to build the habits. But if we don't have those habits, then again, we're relying on willpower. We're relying on untrained brain. You know, the neuro pathways of going to McDonald's may have been built from 20 years. So now you're trying to build a neuro pathway that's cooking at home, right? And then one day something happens and you find yourself going there again. That's where it's like, nope, I'm trying to build this neuro pathway. But the more that I practice this, right, this other one may have been in there for 20 years. So yes, acknowledge that you're on this little dirt road in Podunk town, right? And this neuro pathway, and this one is a super highway. We get to acknowledge that, but that's where we also get to make that choice, create that discipline, and not to make, oh, well, that neuro pathway was stronger, so I went with that. That's just excuses. And when you create that discipline, it's so much stronger than willpower.
I talk about willpower a lot. Willpower is attached to an emotion. You know, once that emotion goes away, the willpower typically goes away as well. So it's, you know, a lot of what gets brought up in this group is why can't I just get the willpower, the willpower that I had after surgery? And what they don't understand is that we've moved through that phase. We've moved through that phase, and now it's practice, it's discipline, and it's over and over and over. You know, it's like asking yourself, like when a situation hits and it was so uncomfortable that you walk yourself through it, and you're like, okay, how would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10? It's like, of course, probably the first 30 times that we practice it, it's going to be a 10. But then like the 45th, 60th time, it's going to be like an 8, and then it's going to be a 7, and then it's going to be a 6. And it gets easier and easier and easier to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the willpower attached to the emotion, absolutely, because there's also not only why can I do that like I was at the beginning of surgery. I think that again, that's the honeymoon phase, and there's this resolve that people have. And at that time, you're allowing other people to take care of you because you just had surgery. And so for a period of time, there is this freshness of not only right after surgery, but there's also this, I'm allowing other people to take care of me. I don't know if you see this, but I see people who are a lot of caretakers. They take care of everybody else, but they're not prioritizing themselves. And so a lot of times I'm like, when are you on your list? Like you have a list, but are you on the list, right? Is your stuff on the list, or is everybody else's stuff on the list? Because right after surgery, you were on the list. And at what point did you get off the list? And so you've got to put yourself back on the list. And I think that's pivotal. But that also has a lot to do with the willpower piece too, because when you're on the list and you're doing the discipline stuff, the willpower isn't as prevalent.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it's a process, right? It's a process that we have to work through, and it's an uncomfortable process we have to work through. But the more you practice it, I did a live video this weekend, and it was on meal prep, and somebody said, how can you have all that stuff in your pantry and not eat it? Because I've practiced not eating it. You know, I have a whole 5-gallon bucket of goodies for Chris and Chloe for their lunches, but I practice not eating it. And so it's super easy for me. If I was always eating them and I always had that taste of sugar, I would probably always be I would be craving that every day. But the more you practice it, the easier it just gets to say no.
Yep. I'm the same way. I have stuff in my cabinets, and I've had people ask me the same thing. And it's like, that's not for me. Like, I kind of separate my food from their food, and there's just things that I don't eat. Like, my husband's a vegetarian. I jokingly call him a breaditarian. I have bread all over my house. I don't eat bread. Eat bread. It's just not part of what I eat. But he will make fresh bread. He will make bread. But I don't eat bread. So we end up eating different things, and that's okay too. But, he'll have stuff that he eats that's not mine. And it's not that it's off limits in a negative way for me. It's not like, oh, Kristin, you can't have that. I could have that. But where I put the power back on me is I choose not to have that. And this is a different conversation, but because I am working on honoring my body, loving myself, and that stuff is not good for me. Not just from a taste bud standpoint, but from a body standpoint. It's not going to get me to where I want to go. It's filler food. That's one of the things I learned first thing out of surgery is you eat the insides, because the bread and all that other stuff, it's filler. We don't have filler space anymore.
Yep. And that's the thing after regain too, is you fought so hard for yourself to have this surgery. I mean, think about most people. I went down to Mexico, so mine was relatively easy than people having it in the States, and the process that they have to go through in the States is they fought so hard to have the surgery. And it was like that brand new, like Porsche or Tesla or Range Rover, and it had 0 miles and the new smell on it, wasn't dinged, and you're going to keep it pristine, and then, after about a year, you park way out in the grocery store and somebody dinged it, right? And at first you're super upset because somebody dinged it, but the newness of the car starts wearing off. I always tell people, even dealing with like COVID signs, this is going to be the next time that you truly fight for yourself again. And like you said, where do you belong on this list? Are you on that list? Are you fighting for you every day and for you to come back? And people always bring up, like, I didn't do this after surgery. I didn't, when a trigger hit or a stressor hit, I didn't go and start eating. I broke that habit. And why did it come back in?
Right.
And it's to your point, practice. You got to practice again. And this is going to be the second time that you fight for yourself.
Oh, well, I love your story about you had a brand new car right after surgery, and you had said you went to Mexico. I didn't have too much of, I didn't have like a long waiting period. We ended up selling our house so that I could have surgery. So I was a cash pay, but we ended up moving.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we ended up moving from Washington to Georgia and using the proceeds from our house to pay for my surgery, which was how it happened so quickly. And then we saved up and bought another house. But the thing that I learned, and I wrote about this in Release Your Regain, is about 6 weeks out, this was where I realized I had issues with food, was it said on my post-op list, you can eat puree, or not puree, pate. Do you know what pate is, everybody? Pate is like a finely ground meat. Well, Kristin decided she was going to stick a freaking cheeseburger in a blender because that's pate. Or so I thought, water, cheeseburger in a blender. And then I had one small spoonful. I was so sick, so doubled over in pain. And then I had to have a heart to heart with myself. I was like, girl, this is not good. You have some issues. We need to work on some stuff. But it was a deep heart to heart, because it was all I could think about was that flippin' cheeseburger. And the cheeseburger, whatever the food is, it's not going to solve what's in here. And even once you get to goal, if there's, it's still not going to solve the weight loss is not going to solve what's going on in here. Only you can solve what's going on in here.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing too, identifying the emotion with the trigger too. Like, I mean, I think I was in denial after my surgery when I thought, oh, I'm not a foodie. I'm not addicted to food. I just made bad choices. No, Tasha, you were, because anytime boredom hit, what did you want to do? You wanted to eat. Yep. Anytime avoidance hit, guess what, Tasha? You wanted to eat. And so it's like, I had to come clean with myself and say, no, you were addicted to food, because once this emotion triggered, boom, this is what you did. This emotion triggered, boom, this is what you did. And it was a few years after I had surgery before I finally made that connection of, okay, so now when boredom hits, what are you going to do? Because you can't go to food anymore. So what are you going to do? Because now you've already identified boredom, eat. Okay, now I need to break that cycle. And so then I have to find ways to soothe. And you touched on this on your slide. One of the ways I soothe besides food is I love all my puppies. So I always pick them up. I have 2 little ones. And so that's one of the ways that I soothe myself without food. Also, bubble baths is another one at night, and tea. Yeah. So those are my top 3. And so when I have that emotion trigger, okay, here's my list. 1, 2, 3. This is what I do. So cue that list up, not my eating list.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was perfect.
Journaling. I have my journal. Like, I just, keep it simple.
And you guys too, Kristin's journal is up on Amazon. I absolutely love the layout of her journal. So please make sure, that you pick this up, because this is one of the best journals that I have seen. So I absolutely love her journal, and it's 3 and 6 month, right?
Yep. And I'll send you the link for the 6 months, so you have it.
Okay. And then also to make sure her book as well. This was one of the first books that I read post-op. So make sure you snag her book and her journal. So both great reads. And I like the journal. I mean, like Kristin said, it keeps you grounded. It keeps you focused. It keeps you consistent. When you're consistently journaling, guess what? The consistency comes in other areas of your life because you're being consistent journaling. But if you're journaling only on Sundays and then you skip the rest of the week, you're going to be like a ping pong ball. You're going to be bouncing. Yeah. So I'm going to read us some. Oh, go ahead, Kristin. Sorry.
I was just going to say, put it in your schedule. Like, I create a morning routine for myself, and it's very much just, I have a little series of things that I do, and part of which is journaling. But if you make yourself a priority in your day, it's just there. It's just part of what you do.
Mm-hmm. I have 3:00 on my calendar, and my clients know this. All my clients, 3:00 is blocked out, and from 3 to about 4:30, 5:00, I'm in the gym. That's blocked out 7 days a week on my calendar, and then my rest days I just delete it off. But that's how I make time for myself, because we're perfectionists, right? I swear we're all like type A personalities. If it's not on my calendar, guess what I do? I work. I'll just work.
I'm the same way.
It has to be calendarized for me. So Paula says, reminds us of training our new puppy. We divert his attention from chewing on the rug to his toy. Oh, I remember getting the toy box for my puppies, because one of them got the chair. Melissa says, I am in a DBT PTSD group therapy, and they have us do mindful breathing exercises.
Love it. Love it. Yes.
Suzette says, ladies, this was a fantastic video full of wisdom. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Oh, I'm so grateful.
Tangible, also tangible things to practice.
Absolutely.
So I love this one. Melissa said, in my PTSD group, they make us fact check our thoughts. Right? How do you know that to be true?
Exactly. So important.
Paula, hashtag fighting for me. Awesome. Jackie says, took the surgery to break my addiction, then frustration from a long stall. I snuck bites here and there, and now I'm back with this bad habit again. So like we went over, you're going to have to practice reversing that.
Yep. And knowing what you're going to do ahead of time, like you had said, having that list of what you're going to do and different times of the day. Like I've known people that 3 o'clock is their time. The other thing that's classic is this night eating thing. And I find that the reason that night eating is so prevalent is because that's the only time of the day that you're really alone with your thoughts. And there can be this fear of what's going to come up. And so I just invite people to journal and or to again have those activities or go to bed early. So a lot of times we're wanting to eat again that 3 o'clock time or evening because our body, again, physiologically, we're trying to stay awake if you're tired. And so sometimes we think that we're hungry. I'm sure you use this too. You think you're hungry and you're really thirsty. So you need water. Or you think you're hungry and you're really tired. So you really need to put yourself to bed. And so having those alternative activities can be so supportive. And it's give yourself a high five or write it down, mark it somewhere to celebrate that you've pivoted, that you've shifted. Because it's not a punishment to yourself to not eat. It's actually a celebration. I find it to be a celebration because in those moments we're wanting something, and yet it's usually something deep down emotionally that we're wanting. So a lot of times I'll ask, what is it that I need right now? What's coming up within me? And again, that hand over the heart is what's happening right now, what's coming up. And so that's another place where you get to honor yourself and your body, pull out your journal and allow yourself to be.
Well, because let's face it, right? When we became obese before we had surgery, we didn't honor our commitments to ourselves. I mean, if we were great at discipline and we were great at honoring our commitments to ourselves, we would have never became obese. We would have never, or if we did get overweight, we would have been able to take it to diet successfully down instead of we went to the extreme. We had 80% of our stomachs removed. And so I think that's one that people really need to learn is how to celebrate their wins, how to honor themselves, how to honor their commitments and be proud of it. But it's like you mentioned, that all or nothing. And I talk about that a lot too. It's the all or nothing. Well, where do you meet yourself in the middle? And when you, like you said, we're going to mess up. We're always going to mess up. But what did we learn?
Yeah.
And people don't think about it like that because what happens is, and you know this, they mess up. And then here comes the inner critic telling them how no good they are. They shouldn't have had the surgery. Look at you. You can't be successful. You can't do this. Instead of saying, you know what, I slipped up. And I slipped up because I'm a little stressed right now. And so I chose to eat this and walk themselves through it and forgive themselves and then move on.
Right.
It's a completely different conversation with yourself.
Completely different conversation. And that compassion is so important. That compassion is so important. Yet there's this incredibly high standard. And again, that's where I think the all or nothing perfectionism comes in. And so what I remind people of is if you were watching a toddler, right? A 2-year-old trying to walk and they kept falling down, would you go, get up, you stupid idiot, right? You're not anything, right? Would you yell at a 2-year-old? People are like, oh my gosh, I would never do that. Okay, well, you're 2 years post-op, roughly, right? Are you going to yell at yourself like that? Like you're still learning, right? So where's the compassion for okay, self, you messed up. And again, what am I learning from it? The more, and again, that's where I revert back to sports psychology, because when you see, and it doesn't matter the sport, it could be ice skating, right? How do they get to do the triple loop-de-loops or whatever? You got to start with knowing how to ice skate. And then you're going to fall down. I saw a video last week where there was some girl, I don't know where she was or how old it was, but she like literally hit her chin on the ice, was bleeding, got up, kept going, didn't miss a beat. She just kept going. And then afterwards she was like holding her chin because it was bleeding, but she kept going. And so there is this, okay, I'm gonna heal the chin. I'm gonna fix it. But this is my moment. I'm gonna not miss a beat. It's like there's so much learning there.
Mm-hmm. Well, now it's like, okay, we got a lot of learning to do because COVID-19, we've never encountered this.
Never.
Right? I'm 44 years old. Have I ever been on lockdown? No. Have I never been able to go to a restaurant? No. And so now you have all these triggers because, well, I was used to Chloe going to school. I got a break from a teenager while she was at school.
Oh my God.
Then she's getting bored. So guess what? She's a teenager. So then I was getting the smart mouth, right? And it's just like, oh my gosh, you got to go to school. But it's not, it's we get a break from our kids going to school. That's kind of a break. I'm driving to work, kind of a break for myself. It's just me alone in the car. I either talk on the phone to my mom or listen to the radio or what. That's another little peaceful break for me. Right. Then the hustle and bustle starts because we get to the office.
Right.
Then all of a sudden that's just completely ripped out from underneath us, right? And now these habits and behaviors have crept in because we triggered us to do what we were really good at before surgery, eat our emotions. Yep. So now you guys, Kristin's presentation is perfect, right? You got to practice reversing it.
Right. And I've given a ton of tools in here. So saying this with love, but there really aren't any excuses because there's so many tools to help you get back into that window of tolerance. And if the narrative is just so loud or the voices are just so loud, again, go get additional therapeutic support, right? That's what you need. Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing. When it's so extreme, there may be that additional level of care that's needed. But if it's okay, I'm using the tools, you've got to use the tools. And then there's folks who go, but what if I just won't follow through? And I see those folks too. It's like, okay, how do I practice to follow through? Well, how do you follow through anything else? How do you follow through with brushing your teeth? How do you follow through with anything? It's literally one step at a time. It's not piling on everything or trying to do all the tools all at once. It's you make a decision and you take action.
Mm-hmm. And you don't fall on your face and you get up, you learn from it and you take action again. And if you fall down again, you learn from it and you take action again. You may fall down 20 times on the same thing before you finally get up and start running, or even walking. It's like I bring up the analogy, like, because I don't know how to walk in high heels at all. Like you always see me, I'm in workout pants, my tank tops, my flip flops, or my workout shoes. So you put me in high heels walking, I am going to fall and fall and fall and fall. But that's okay because one day I will learn how to walk in high heels and get it, right? But I'm not just, if I fall down in the street, I'm not just going to lay there and be like, oh my gosh, I fell down. Look at me, people. I'm going to get up really quick, dust myself off, and look around to make sure that nobody saw me. Did I get up fast enough? But I would still keep on practicing. One of these days, I wore wedges my wedding day. One of these days, I will get walking in high heels.
Are you super tall?
No, I'm 5'2".
Okay. I was like, you're never going to see me in heels because I'm nearly 6 feet tall. So I'll never wear heels. I'm okay with that.
These women who wear these skinny high heel spikes, it's like, I am so jealous because you would see girlfriend here just wipe out many, many, many times.
Practice.
But that's okay. It's on my list to practice. And I got high heels in my closet, and I do put them on it. And just to the point, it's like, I'll just wear these and practice on the carpet. Right. But I don't know what it is with high heels. It just, we don't get along very well. Paul said crept in. She said we said crapped in. Any questions? Well, we have Kristin on, you guys. I've read all the ones that I see. I'm looking at my phone just to make sure I don't miss anything. Laura, she says, great session. Patty says, I'm so not a type A personality. Also, she just started reading the book. And then the links, you guys, Kristin will give us the links to her book, her 3-month and her 6-month. And give me all the links that you want, Kristin, and I will put them up. And then I am actually going to order your other book, Release Your Regain, because I want to read that. So
there's a lot about perfectionism in there. And on control. That's a whole other chapter.
You're right. It's so easy to get caught up in perfectionism and controlling. And we can't control everything. I mean, we can only control what we can control. Like, I can control how clean the house is when I'm here. But trust me, when I go on business trips and work trips, Chloe and Christopher's idea of clean is not quite Tasha's idea of clean, right? So I can only control what I can control. And that used to really bug me, but I learned to slowly and gradually let go of it, because it's like, it's so small. There's bigger things to focus on. But again, it's practice. And when we practice this, just not the nutrition and these habits, it carries over. And Kristin, you'll probably know this. It carries over to every aspect of your life.
Yep.
Everything gets better. And I love hearing I love hearing that feedback when people say, my relationship's getting better, my marriage is getting better. I'm learning how to communicate with my children better. You know, I'm becoming a better stepmother or a better wife. It spills over into every aspect of, you know, I came into a marriage and I didn't have kids of my own. Chris had custody of 2 teenagers, right? I had to, and I'm open about this. I had to learn how to be a stepmother. I had to learn patience, you know, and I still have to learn that. So we're practicing in all areas of our life, but when we practice, it just spills over, and you don't even realize, like, I'm practicing being a better stepmother. Like, I didn't even think that was a concept. Never heard of that before.
Oh yeah.
And so it's so interesting.
I got a quote that I heard that's called, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So when somebody's really struggling, I'll ask, what other area of your life is this coming up? And sometimes people will say it doesn't, and then they have to think about it, and then they'll come back later and go, oh yeah. And then there's usually this, oh yeah, it's happening in some other places. And then it's like, okay, so let's work on it here, and then it will show up in other places. So,
well, and I get like, how can I be such a rock star in my job and I can't do this? And then you ask the question. So go back to this, Kristin. Well, how did you become a rock star in your job? You just didn't start your job and all of a sudden become a rock star, right?
Yeah.
You learned, you practiced, you learned your job very, very well, and you got respect from. Bring that same skill set that makes you a rock star in your job right into this. Just bring it over here.
Exactly. And that's what it is.
I don't see. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Kristin.
No, I was just going to say, make yourself as much of a priority as your job is.
Yeah. I don't see any more questions. Thank you so much for everybody joining in live. This was a phenomenal conversation, phenomenal presentation. I know this is going to have a ton of replays. So send me your links. I will post them up. I'm going to archive this video, and I'm going to have all Kristin stuff, just like I do with everything else, all organized in there, so that you don't have to search for anything, right? Definitely watch the replay over and over and over and over, because you're going to pick up, a lot of things from this video. I know that even as a coach, I did. So make sure that you guys, watch the replay And, thank you so much, Kristin, for making time
Thank you
for this presentation, making time for the group. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Okay, and with that, I'm gonna end the presentation. If you guys have any questions, please post them up. I'll make sure to post up the links for you, and this presentation will be up right away. All right. Jackie says lots of good info, and thank you. You guys are completely welcome. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.